While we just wait for everyone to join, I will introduce myself and our speakers today. My name is Claire and I run the Faber Music Teachers Community. This is a new group established earlier this year, and we provide a space for teachers to talk to us as a publisher, as well as offering free resources and CPD sessions like this one today. So today we're going to be talking about teaching beginners, and I'm joined today by Paul Harris. Many of you will know Paul from his books on sight reading, but he also produces lots of resources for teaching beginners, including the Faber Music Basics series. And Paul is joined today by trombonist, teacher and author Jonny Watkins, and they will be talking today about strategies for teaching beginners and using some examples from their new beginner method, Trombone Basics. So before we begin, just a few things to note. We're aiming for this presentation to last just over 30 minutes. During the presentation, please feel free to submit questions in our Q&A box, and there will be time for these at the end. If you're having any technical issues, please let me know in the chat and I will try to help as best I can. And finally, this webinar is being recorded and will be emailed out to you all tomorrow. So now I'm going to hand over to Paul and Jonny.
Thank you, Claire, and hello, everyone. We can't see anyone, but we know you're there. Anyway, it's great to be here with you today. It's great to have Jonny here as well. And over the last while, we have been producing Trombone Basics, the latest in this series. So we're going to obviously talk about Trombone Basics, but also talk about the general kind of strategies and principles for teaching beginners. So if you happen to be not a trombone player, either a brass of another brass instrument or indeed any instrument, I hope you'll find a lot of interesting stuff here. Just particularly talking about the trombone version, it does come in two versions. Obviously we've done the bass clef version, but we know that many players are treble clef readers. And so there is a treble clef version. It's exactly the same, but obviously treble clef, and there is a teacher's part which you can see next to this, specifically for treble clef version as well. Jonny is here with us, and do just drop in if you've got a thought at any time, Jonny, to make any particular points, particularly if I'm forgetting something important. So that's where we started from. There are some principles that really underlie all the basic series, which are these, and that is that learners, whether they be young or not so young, prefer tunes to exercises and studies. That is not to say that we don't have lots of exercises and studies, very good ones as well, but they're not always called exercises and studies, and we've tried to give them catchy titles. The young people, not so young learners, like to be entertained rather than lectured. I'm sure you know what I mean by that. And, you know, we don't mean entertained in a frivolous kind of way, but the whole learning process, the whole learning and teaching process always needs to be fun. It always needs to have that kind of fun side to it. And so a lot of the titles are witty, a lot of the pieces are witty, and we hope that that will form the kind of the thinking in the lessons themselves, which, you know, can have a lot of fun about them. Learners learn best what they want to know and what they need to know. So we've tried to present material that fits those two particular principles. You know, I need to know this in order to play this piece or to move forward. And so we presented everything in a very logical, I hope, very meaningful kind of progression, where it's very clear why. And, you know, if learners know why they're learning the next thing, then they're happy to learn it, and they'll do so with much more enthusiasm. We all like to laugh, and I hope there's a lot of fun stuff in the book to enable that to happen. There are accompaniments to almost every piece, either duets or piano accompaniments, and they can all be assessed from this particular link. And I'm sure that we can show you this again later. fabermusic.com/audio. All the accompaniments are there. So let's move on, see what there is to do. There are 20 stages in all, and each of them are set out in the same kind of way, in a very fun way, with information presented in particular ways that I'll go through in as we go through. And the pieces we hope are going to be very attractive. So here is stage one, where they begin with 3 notes. We obviously show the positions. How does those positions things work, Jonny? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the position charts. How do you know you've actually got 4th position exactly right?
Well, I think for beginners, I mean, certainly from my own experience, certainly for those first few notes, there are landmarks. So I think the diagrams show, you know, for D in 4th position, you want the top of the slide just about level with the bell. Which, you know, it's not going to be exactly the same on every trombone. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a good guideline to start from. And C down in 6th, it tends to be a comfy arm length. What you don't want is anybody to stretch down and move the mouthpiece, you know, to a funny position. But I think they're quite clear. Just following on from what you were saying before, Paul, I think one of the real strengths about the book, and having the teacher's parts, is it brings in chamber music from the very beginning. And I know we're about to hear the first couple of pieces, but yeah, I think one of the real strengths is building and counting from the beginning, and having the teacher's part, just playing crotchets along with the semi-breves here. So really encourages the pupils to listen. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, there it is. So you can see we very carefully, I mean, the teacher's parts get more interesting and complex as we move forward, but here the teacher's part really is the counting, for the pupil to understand. And in fact, the first 4 pieces, under number 2, going down, it's a kind of like a lift really, or an elevator, and you can practice each of the 4 segments on their own, but then you can put them all together and you get actually really quite an extended piece as your very first piece, the result of these 4. And here is Jonny and a pupil of his giving a performance of these first 4 little pieces. So I'm sure and hope that you know, your pupils will enjoy that as their first performance, really. Lots of top tips. Some are technical, to do with precise trombone kind of stuff. Others are more general. I like this one very much on the first page. And if we get our pupils to do this, read the note names out loud and hear the music in your head before you play, you know, we can all do that. They can hear these pieces in their head. If we do this from lesson 1 and we continue to do it, our pupils will be able to read music and it'll never be a kind of problem to them. There are also the 4 Ps, which we have given as thoughts behind everything we've done. You might know these 4 Ps if you ever come to any of my talks. And if these 4 Ps are always represented in some way in every lesson, you know you're doing a good job. Something about posture, which is either posture or something to do with technique. Something about pulse, which is rhythm. Phonology is just a kind of fancy word, as we've written there, fancy word for sound. Telephone, phonograph, gramophone, phone just means sound. So let's have a think about the sound we make and the personality of the music. You know, when you're playing a piece, are you giving it some character? So I think these 4 Ps are always there in our thinking, certainly, and also as you're teaching. If you want to go into it in a bit more detail, forgive me, but there's a little book I've done which about it. We move on. Stage 3, for example, and just wanted to have a look at these boxes we put at the beginning of each stage. We give facts, any ingredient that is introduced in that particular stage. We just talk very briefly about it. There's a rhythm box, which gives you a little rhythm exercise to understand, maybe clap. That will be any new rhythm that's introduced, new notes, and top tips as well. And so here is stage 3, and we've got a performance here, again by Jonny and pupil, of Fast Food Rag. So very simple, but the teacher's part already here is a bit more fun and complicated to make it sound like a really good piece. There we go. At the end of each stage, we also have an activity box, which include all sorts of interesting and different kind of activities, just really to check that pupils have understood all the stuff. In a way, it's like learning a bit of theory. And I say very regularly, theory is not dreary unless you think it is, and it never is. And it's so useful for our pupils to understand stuff. Some rhythms to clap, some music to write down, maybe some always an idea of writing their own little piece, which is a lot of fun. Stage 5, we move on to. Just really here wanted to give you an example of a piece that has a piano accompaniment. Many of them arrangements, a number of them little pieces I've written, and we've tried to make the piano accompaniments quite straightforward. So if you have a bit of piano technique, you can play along, and it gives it that sort of complete performance idea. So here is, I think, a performance of Bubblegum, and hopefully the title and the actual rhythmical basic idea will become quite obvious. So some fun there. Some other ideas. We obviously introduce scales at the appropriate time with fun titles, as you can see there, and fun accompaniments to make the scales sound really interesting. We always want our pupils to understand why scales are important and enjoy doing them from the very beginning. From this page, we're going to have a quick performance of Apple Pie and Custard. And again, you can see how the title has formed, is based on the rhythm of the words, and a little scale pattern. And so a simple little exercise, really, but suddenly, from all points of view, it becomes interesting. We've also got another little performance here for you of this little duet, which we rather like, Fishbone. Playing there. I don't know the name of your people there, Jonny, but
I was about to say I should probably give him a fairly public apology because he was a bit blindsided when I turned up to his lesson and said, "Right, today we're recording these." He had no idea what was coming, so I should probably apologise to Oliver.
Well done. Oh no, not so well done, Oliver. He's taken it on with terrific enthusiasm. A lot of the stages end with a really rather a fun activity as well. So, for example, here is a word search. Do you know what all the words mean? And here we've got some particular trombone words, but also, we want to make sure that our people, the kind of language that we use, the vocabulary, that they are understanding all that, so they know these words. So lots of word searches. Another idea that we introduce is this practice map, because it's very important for youngsters or beginners of any age not to think that practice is just I play through this piece. But I want them to really be a lot more thoughtful, making connections in their mind with some particular areas of musical thinking. Rhythm, for example. Now, how many times is this rhythm repeated? You may be yourself as a teacher asking them questions or putting ideas in their mind. When you play this piece, first of all, look through it, and are there any patterns? Are there any repeated rhythm patterns or arpeggio patterns or whatever? So they're looking for patterns. They play the scale and the arpeggio of the key of the piece first. Maybe they improvise using those notes. There's a technical one here. How many times can you repeat this rhythm, that rhythm we see there, neatly tongued in one breath? So all sorts of interesting areas that they can explore during practice rather than just playing the piece through, with the brain not necessarily engaged. Here's a great performance that Jonny's done of this Rock Solid. Terrific performance there from Oliver, clearly on great form. So we move on, and here's now what do we put this particular one here for? Some of them are, oh yes, just to talk about a particular top tip that I know Jonny particularly is really interested. It's a very interesting one. Do you want to say a bit about this kind of the oar shape and all that side of stuff?
Yeah, well, I mean, about the top tips in general as well. I think we try to just give reminders, again, as Paul said, not always technical, but to do with reading key signatures and putting character in music. But there are some more technical ones in there. I think in these we tried not to kind of tread on toes of teachers, because obviously every teacher will have their own way of discussing these things. But these are ones that I think are quite straightforward and quite approachable and easy reminders for the pupils to think about. So letting your jaw relax, being this one. For low notes, it always sounds a little bit it can be confusing sometimes. I mean, I'd like to think you need a nice open space in your mouth, which when your mouth is closed is obviously a bit counterintuitive. But I think by giving a nice simple explanation, let your jaw relax and make an oar shape inside your mouth, it just helps the tongue get out of the way, and makes those low notes a little bit easier to play because there's less tension inside. But I think that's obviously difficult to explain to potentially a 7 or 8 year old who's doing these. So yeah, through the top tips, we've tried to keep them nice and simple.
But interesting, and I think they can understand that oar shape, and like having an extremely large bit of ice cream in their mouth, whatever, or putting a whole orange in their mouth. But it's fun. I think these are really interesting and fun areas to consider. I pulled this one out because scales, again, let's think about scales in interesting ways. So in F major, we introduce in this stage, what's the key signature? Say the notes, play the arpeggio. What notes will you be playing? Play the scale in grazioso style, in a creepy style, because these are taken from the pieces in this stage and are interesting. And suddenly, I can play my scale in a creepy style. Now I think more about playing in that creepy style when I'm playing the piece, and more stuff there they can do, which I think makes connections and is really very interesting. Some of the ensemble pieces have actually got 3 trombones. So if you're teaching in a group, then that's a very nice thing to be able to do. So here on this particular page, a couple of pieces that are actually trios. Sometimes our little top tips are, or this is not top, this is just an idea here, to find a fun fact about the 2 composers in this stage, who both happen to be rather well-known composers. But in today's teaching in schools, for example, there's hardly any music teaching in schools anymore, not enough as we would all like to see. And so often pupils will never have heard of Handel or Mozart. So maybe we can introduce these great composers to them, get them to look on it on the internet and find out something interesting about them. Here's another word search a little bit later on in the book. And here again, we've got lots of interesting different words. And so I hope that just by doing it, and again, do you know what all the words mean? If we take a bit of trouble ourselves as teachers to check they do understand all these things, it means, when we're talking to our pupils, saying these words, they understand them. And of course, that makes teaching and learning that much more fun. There are one or two extra composers that we've either commissioned or use. Obviously, composers from the past who, they're out of copyright, so we can just use their work. But one or two more interesting ones. Here's a lovely piece that Christopher Gunning wrote. Sadly, Chris died about a year ago. But the piece is here nonetheless. Chris Gunning, well known for writing TV signature tunes, adverts, film music. And we've got a little performance here, this terrific little piece, Secret Agent. Obviously, there's some new ingredients here that will be introduced, but then put them together and you get this really fun little piece, Secret Agent. Not much Poco Writ, I noticed there, but isn't it a good fun thing? and lots for your pupils to get their teeth into there. There's lots of exercises, obviously, but give them really fun names. I don't know whether you want to say anything about the chop gyms here, Jonny.
Yeah, there's chop gyms and slide gyms throughout the book, and they're there to help kind of build good habits and build control as well. I think especially with the chop gyms, I always think lip slurs are about building control and strength around your embouchure. And they're also, particularly with the chop gyms, they're ones that you can move up and down positions as you would with a lot of lip slur exercises on brass instruments. But they're throughout the book, and they're also part of introducing the new notes. So the ones in stage 17, as you can see, low F sharp and C sharp are the new notes in that chapter, and we've written the exercises on those notes. But as I said, they can be moved up and down the positions as well.
And also later on in this one, we've got a piece by the great Malcolm Arnold, obviously a trumpeter, so this was obviously not written but arranged. But I remember actually ringing up Malcolm when he was alive about this particular arrangement, and I said, can I use this tune of his, and can I give it this title? And he was very delighted to have it. So there it is, a bit of Malcolm Arnold. We've got some fun crosswords. This is quite late in the book now. Again, it's fun, we've asked the questions in fun ways, so that it just brings people in. It causes them greater engagement when they know they're going to be able to do something, when they know there's going to be a smile involved as well. So I hope that they'll enjoy these fun crosswords that take place. And we come to the very last stage, where we have glissando, and which is obviously a fun technique that trombonists do with tremendous alacrity and fun and verve. So we've actually introduced it here, and some of the pieces, not on this particular page, have quite a bit of glissando in them. Anything you want to say about the glissando?
Well, I mean, only that it would be remiss not to have put in the trombone superpower.
Well,
in the book. But I think also on the next page, actually, so the pieces which feature them, they also kind of build in practice for alternate positions as well. So that rather than just honking out some glisses, which we all, as you say, Paul, we all do enjoy doing, we've kind of focused them a little bit as well. But
absolutely.
they had to be in the book. We couldn't not.
Absolutely. And the very last piece in the book is this rather extraordinary thing that I came up with. I wanted to just to write a canon. So, you know, either you can do it with a one pupil, or I discovered it worked not only for 2 or 3 or 4, but this is an infinite canon at 2 bars distance. And as we say in the fact file, this piece works as a canon for any number of players, maximum 76. I'm sure you will know the significance of 76 trombones. But in actual fact, it works for more, you know, and we had every player in the world who could actually be playing this piece. I've just got a little bit of a performance for you, not 76, you'll be happy to know. I think I've got about 8 players here. So you just kind of hear it as it might unfold, and then it fades out because obviously I don't want it to go on too long. But here's a little snippet of a performance of the infinite ceremonial canon. Well, as you can hear, we got a few of our friends from the percussion section just to join in there. It sounds rather sort of medieval, doesn't it? Because you know, one has to write something that's very within a key. It's got a sort of Renaissance sort of flavor about it. Anyway, I hope they'll feel that that's something really fun to do once they get to the end. And of course, there's 1 or 2 more. We like this in the very last of the activity boxes. A bit of a challenge here. You know, using the highest and lowest notes, you know, play as loud as you can, soft as you can, short as you can, long as you can. And these kind of challenges, you know, young players, beginners of all ages, they quite like these challenges. You can make it competitive, but in a very fun and enjoyable way. And on the last page, we have a certificate, which I hope they will enjoy. Having got this far, of course, you know, they'll be playing the trombone pretty well and having a lot of fun with it. On the Faber page, both the bass clef and the treble clef, you'll find, if you go to actually the page where you can buy the copy, you'll find just hiding down the bottom where you download the teacher's part. The teacher's part is a free download, and there's the treble clef one on this page, which I've got here. There's also the bass clef one on the bass clef page. It's a free download, so you get that. So there we are, a quick tour through Trombone Basics, and I'm just going to stop sharing now, and hopefully we might be able to join you. Here we are. Excellent. If anyone has any thoughts, questions, comments at all.
Great, yeah, thank you so much, Paul and Jonny. Yeah, really interesting overview of the books and kind of your approach putting them together, and also really good to see some performances. So thank you, Jonny. So yeah, as you said, we do have a bit of time for questions now. So this is your chance to ask Paul and Jonny any of your questions about the book or the Basics series, or just general questions you have about teaching beginners. I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. So please do put your questions in the Q&A box if you've got them. And while we wait, I'll just kick off with a question. So Paul and Jonny, you obviously worked together to create this book. What did you enjoy most about the process of writing Trombone Basics?
Yeah.
Oh, right. I'll jump in first just in case you take my answer. No, for me, actually, it was just a lot of fun to work with Paul, who obviously, you know, is a bit of a legend in music education. So it was just a real pleasure to work with him, learn about his methods, and how he works. It's been really fascinating, and quite a really educational experience for me, I think. Stepping away from the trombone side of things and putting that bit in the book, it's just been really wonderful to work with Paul.
And likewise, it's been a pleasure. We did most of it online, and I just had a lot of fun. And to me, that always has to unpin whatever you do. I mean, I know there is a lot of serious stuff in life, but as much as possible, if we can enjoy what we're doing, serious stuff, we can enjoy it, whether it's writing the book or teaching from it, playing the trombone, playing an instrument. If you find that deep rooted enjoyment, has such a effect on the way that we are, and helps us to deal with slightly less nice things in life. But I don't want to get too serious about it because we're talking about trombone here. But it was fun, and I learned a lot about trombone. So I always get myself an instrument and have a go. I won't tell you how lucky or how advanced I managed to get on the trombone, but anyway, there's one in the house somewhere. So it was good fun.
Great, thank you both. We've had one question which is about breathing. Is there any tips in the book about breathing, or any tips that you have for teaching good kind of breathing technique for beginners?
Jonny.
It certainly gets mentioned. I think there are something. Doesn't talk too much about holding the instrument and your kind of very beginning breathing, just because I think actually that tends to be something as teachers we cover almost before you play a note, so how you're holding the instrument, how you're going to take that first breath. So it doesn't touch on that. It does talk about sustaining sustaining notes, using air to support notes and support intonation and stuff later on.
I don't think we put this thought in the book, although maybe we could put it in some supplementary. The way because clarinet is my main instrument, but the way that I always introduce that kind of sense of you're blowing, you have to kind of feel the pressure. I just give them this little exercise very early on and then continue it. The very first time we take a breath through our nose, because if you take a breath through your nose, you can feel the lungs filling up more than you take it through your mouth. If you try that now, if you breathe in through your nose, you can feel the process much more than if you breathe in through your mouth. Then I get pupils to put their tongue on their alveolar ridge, which is that little ridge behind your top teeth. If you feel your top teeth, and then there's that you can feel that little ridge behind your top teeth. You put your tongue there, as if you're about to say T or two. That's where you put your, and then with that, you've taken that big breath, you'll put your tongue there, you blow against your tongue, and then you really can feel the pressure, your tongue's holding the air back, and then you do a big hiss. You just let that air go through, but not completely. Your tongue is still resisting. And that to me is a really good way. And is that okay with you, Jonny? I mean, that's the way I kind of introduce that whole kind of thing of big breathing.
Yeah, I mean, I to slightly disagree on a kind of thing, not disagree, but just to offer a different. I try not to let them breathe through their nose very much, because it's
only the very first time. I'm not teaching them to breathe through the nose, because
okay.
Just the very first time we do this exercise.
Yeah.
Because you can feel the air coming in. I would never do it again. It's just the first.
Oh, right. No, I tend to talk about swimming, because of course a lot of the time the kids, young kids are learning to swim at about the same age they might be starting the trombone, and they all seem to have, and I think we all have actually, held your breath underwater as long as you can. And I think that first breath, when you come back up to the surface and you think, oh, crikey, it's time to get back up and breathe out. The first breath you take, where your body just takes over, you're not trying. It's a very natural in-breath. You absolutely maximize the amount you're taking in. So I try and encourage them to think about that. So they're not really doing anything, they're just letting their body take that breath in. So I think sometimes when we overthink things and try too hard, we actually create more problems.
Yeah, really interesting. Thank you. It's one of those things, isn't it, breathing, where you don't really think about it all the time, but then when you stop to think about it, it's, you can really,
absolutely.
there's so much to think about. So we've got another question, which was about what advice you might have for young beginners who were thinking about learning the trombones, maybe thinking about what instrument to start. What would you say to convince them to give it a go?
Oh, do it. Definitely. No, I think it's, I mean, obviously never going to knock any other instrument. They're all amazing. But I think the trombone has about the greatest range of stuff it can do. I think it's a really versatile instrument. And whether you like, whether classical music's your thing, or playing you want to play in an orchestra or a jazz band or a ska band, funk band, anything like that, you can do it. Yeah, there's no limits on what you can do.
There's as Jonny says, there are all these different ensembles, but there's, for example, the brass band fraternity is wonderful, and there are brass bands all over the country. Loads of people join these ensembles at all ages, and there's such a big and fun repertoire to play. And these ensembles, they have this great sense of camaraderie. They join these groups. They get new friends. They perform, and you get to perform at interesting occasions, because brass bands have always been asked to open shops. I don't know whether you open shops anymore, but open things, football matches, whatever. There's always the brass band there, and once you've got basic technique, once you've done trombone basics, you'll have enough technique probably to join a lot of brass bands. It's so much fun.
Great, thank you. We've had another question, which is about, do you have any specific tips on how to encourage young players to develop and care about producing their best sound?
Over to you.
I
think, well, let me just make a point there, maybe while you're thinking, Jonny. The first thing is that they need to know what a best sound is. And so, we as teachers, we want to be playing to them quite a lot. I think some teachers, maybe they take their instrument with them, but often don't get them out the case. But the good teacher is always taking the instrument out the case and making that sound. So your pupil in their inner ear has got that model of what a good sound is. And it's one of the 4 P's: phonology, the sound. And let's have that, every lesson, let's think about the quality of the sound, because making a good quality sounds. I often talk to players about what we feel when we make the sound, because we resonate with the sound, and that's great, and that's part of the fun of it. We actually feel part of the sound because we are actually resonating the sound. Don't you have got anything to add to that?
Well, I think that's another part of the beauty of all the teachers' parts and having the duet parts and playing with your pupil from the very beginning, is they can hear what you sound like. And I mean, I don't know about anyone who's watching, but certainly I remember all my teachers and the way they played, and that was always, you always wanted to emulate them. I mean, my first teacher, actually, I just thought he was cool. That's why I started the trombone, actually. I wanted to be like him. He used to turn up on his motorbike with his long hair and his trombone, his gig bag slung over his shoulder like a Western gunslinger. But I've never ridden a motorbike, never grown my hair long, and the trombone was it, really. That's my effort at emulating him. But also the way he played, and subsequent teachers after that, they all came from different backgrounds and did different things and sounded ever so slightly different. So you just want to copy them. Had these seemingly very exciting lives, and by copying them was kind of my way of trying to do what they do.
I just noticed, I don't know whether everyone's seen this, a very good point by Jane, who says that trombone is also a very accessibly priced and low maintenance, in a sense, a low maintenance instrument. Points that aren't shared enough. Absolutely. It's absolutely right from that point of view. Let's get more people playing the trombone. Yeah,
great. That's a great note to end on. I'm just going to answer a couple more questions that we've had through. So one question about, are there versions in other languages? Some books in this series for other instruments are translated into other languages, but it sort of depends on the demand and the territory. So watch this space and feel free to get in touch with us if there is a specific language We're always happy to hear from people. And then we had another question about, are these books available for other instruments? Yes, they are. Paul has done lots of different basics books. So if you have a look on our website, you'll see lots of other basics books for different instruments if you're interested. That's probably all we've got time for today. But I'm just going to quickly wrap up and say this is obviously the last in a series of webinars we've been doing this term for teachers, but we are planning to do more next term, and we'll be emailing around a feedback form, and we'd love to hear from you what you've enjoyed, and if you have any suggestions for topics or authors you'd like to hear from in the future. But other than that, just to say thanks so much again to Paul and Jonny for speaking with us today, and thanks to everyone for coming, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.